to Back from the Abyss. This is a place for stories of hope and healing, recovery, and redemption. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. Hey everyone, it's really good to be back. And today's episode is the first with my new editor and producer, Mike Hooker. And we've really been enjoying working together, and I'm excited to see how he helps shape the podcast for the new season. A quick shout out to those of you who are helping to support the out-of-pocket costs of the podcast. I couldn't be more grateful and honored. And if you too are interested in helping to support the podcast, just click on the Support the Show link in the show notes. I also want to make an announcement about an exciting collaboration for this coming season. As you may know, for the last few years, I've been teaching with Elemental Psychedelics here in Colorado, both in their ketamine-assisted therapy and mushroom therapy training programs. Starting with today's show and through the rest of Season 8, Elemental Psychedelics will be our season sponsor. I've long pondered if there was an ethical way to bring a sponsor on board, and I've had a lot of pitches, and none of them really felt like something I could get fully behind. But here's a shocker. I was running one day, I know, shocker, I was running one day earlier this year, and I had this flash of inspiration. I thought, Elemental, they could be the perfect partner for the podcast. And I feel really good about this partnership for a number of reasons. Dory Lewis, Shannon Hughes, the founders of Elemental, have both been on Back from the Abyss, and they've been trusted colleagues for years. I've found the quality of the teaching and the curriculum with Elemental to be outstanding. And I'm very proud to be part of their mission to emphasize a highly ethical and boundaried and relational approach to psychedelic-assisted therapy. Elemental trains psychedelic therapists from across the U.S. and beyond, and they emphasize experiential learning. You can learn more about Elemental and their upcoming trainings at elementalpsychedelics.com. And finally, related to this sponsorship, I want to assure all of you that Back from the Abyss will continue to explore the vast landscape of psychiatry, and not just psychedelics. I will continue to be an independent and, when necessary, critical voice for all the ways psychiatry is both helping and harming. A listener question here before we dive into Laura's story. I got an email from a therapist in Perth, Australia. Wow, that's pretty cool. And she wrote and asked, how many psychedelic sessions are too many, especially when clients don't seem to be doing the integration work? Where I work, MDMA is for PTSD, psilocybin is for depression, but increasingly we're having clients do 2 sessions of one of the other. How do we ensure that clients get what they need, but not necessarily what they want? First off, I would refer you to an episode I did in March of 2023 called Ketamine versus MDMA versus psilocybin. Some highlights from this: I think it's more helpful to think of psychedelics in a safety harm reduction algorithm rather than linking them with specific diagnoses. If we're talking psychiatric safety, ketamine is the safest, followed by psilocybin, followed by MDMA in third place. And if we're talking medical safety, psilocybin is safest, followed by ketamine, followed by MDMA in a distant third place. And when you add in overall efficacy for various psychiatric presentations, ketamine is the clear winner. It's the place to start with most psychiatric patients. And then psilocybin comes next, and MDMA is in third place. How often should you use these compounds in treatment? I like to think of psychedelic treatments as fertilizer or compost in the Garden of You. Too much fertilizer can be a waste of time and money and effort, and can even poison the garden if the dosing frequency is too high. To give some general guidelines, I think ketamine shouldn't be dosed more than once or twice a week during the acute treatment phase, and every few weeks to months for maintenance treatment. More frequent dosing can lead to loss of efficacy, tolerance, dependence, and addiction. Psilocybin is probably safe and effective as frequently as every month or two, but MDMA, in contrast, has a much lower safety index and probably shouldn't be used more than quarterly or, say, 3 or 4 times a year. Today's episode is the first of a 2-part summer special with Laura Mae Northrup, who was first featured in the original Back from the Abyss Summer Special back in 2022. In this first episode, in an excerpt from her wonderful podcast called Inside Eyes, we hear Laura describe her long and grueling battle with suicidality, which emerged as a result of childhood sexual abuse. And in the second episode in 2 weeks, Laura and I dive deep into her personal healing journey, what worked, what didn't, how she was able to finally put the chronic suicidality to rest. And if you haven't yet checked out the podcast Inside Eyes, please do. It's kind of like a sister podcast to Back from the Abyss, with tons of heart and vulnerability and hard-earned wisdom.
So yeah, this episode is about suicide, a very heavy topic that has touched many of us in different ways. Please take care of yourself as you listen to it and afterward. Research indicates that there is a correlation between sexual violence and suicidality, and particularly that individuals who are sexually abused prior to the age of 16 have a further increased likelihood to experience suicidal feelings or to attempt suicide. For this reason, it feels essential that I talk about suicide in this series. In all my work with survivors, I have seen a similar pattern. Rejection, breakups, emotional distance. These are experiences that many would perceive as hard but manageable. However, for survivors, they can elicit feelings of death and can be a trigger for suicidal thoughts. I have listened to numerous survivors remark in the exact words that disconnection feels like dying. And I wonder about this as it relates to the experience of sexual abuse. Does the level of shame, humiliation, debasement, and catastrophic loneliness that accompanies sexual violence feel like dying? Does the rejection and lack of support after the abuse conjure something akin to death? Is it the shattering dissonance of being blamed for something one was powerless to stop? What is this mysterious and complex connection between death and sexual violence that so many survivors live with? I won't be speaking much about psychedelics in this episode, except to say that the very real risk of suicide underscores the need for sexual violence survivors to have access to effective treatment options, including healing with entheogens and psychedelics. In order to make these treatments accessible, they must be decriminalized or legalized around the world. And I personally support the prioritization of decriminalization. As long as they are criminalized, this type of healing will be complex for marginalized populations who are disproportionately targeted for criminalized activity. It should not be a crime to want to stay alive. It should not be a crime to survive violence. And these are methods we are using to survive and stay alive. This episode today is a very personal one, and in some ways, it's been a hard one to produce. I'm going to talk a little about my personal journey. If I am currently your therapist, or if I've ever been your therapist, or if you are feeling strongly that you would like to reach out to me to start therapy, I'm going to ask that you please respect my privacy and the therapeutic container of our work together and stop listening now, and simply skip this episode. And if you fit that description and you are still listening, I really meant that. So now is a great time to hit stop. And for everyone else, I'm going to share a bit about my personal experience, but I want to make it clear that while I am offering this in service of your healing, my sharing is not an invitation to discuss the contents of this episode with me in future encounters or at events. It is not an invitation to listen to my story as a form of entertainment. If you are someone I am close to and you learn new things about me today, this is not an invitation to share your thoughts on my life or engage me about what you hear in this episode. That does not mean I do not wish to talk with you about it, but rather that I am offering this to the public realm, and that doesn't equate to automatic consent to discuss it in my private life. There is a reason survivors struggle to speak about their experiences. We are stigmatized, blamed, seen as damaged, and heavily projected onto. For me to share about myself, I need something in return. I need you to listen to this and remember that I am a person, just like you. I don't want to be stigmatized or shamed or gawked at. I don't want to be gossiped about or analyzed. I want and need you to muster the highest level of respect and compassion you have for others, and listen from that place. I've been considering killing myself since I was a young person, and I know that for me, that is inextricably linked to the sexual violence I experienced as a child. As a teen, spending time in the punk scene saved my life. I never talked about my abuse, but just being around people who were angry and speaking up about injustice was like a godsend. Punk is a complicated subculture, and I could speak at length with critiques of it. But at the time, it showed me that groups of people can look at violence and name it together, rather than collectively deny or ignore it. And growing up as a white person in the US, the cultural conditioning to collectively deny or excuse violence was and is a ubiquitous force in my life. I was beginning to understand the relationship between interpersonal violence and state violence, finding words and analysis to articulate a quiet knowing stirring in my heart. In my early 20s, I started opening up to friends about my abuse history. It felt like if someone didn't know, they didn't really know me, because it had so deeply shaped my life. On more than one occasion, someone would hear my story and, in an emotional shock, respond by saying something like, "If that had happened to me, I would kill myself." Or the less blunt, more vague, "I don't know how I would live with that." On the one hand, I hated it when people said that. I wished they would say, "Thank you for sharing this with me. I know it was probably hard to do," or something to that effect. And on the other hand, I think they were having a very real and validating response. Who wouldn't consider their own death under those circumstances? I certainly have. There have been times in my life where I was struggling to stay alive every day. While some people at some moments knew what I was going through, in a lot of ways, it was a private, secret struggle that I kept to myself. It wasn't simply a desire to kill myself. It was complex and disturbing. Thinking about not existing was relieving. Thinking about ending it all with a level of violence that matched what was happening inside of me, that gave me momentary peace over and over again. Considering punishing myself for being so wretched momentarily made me feel good, as though I could be redeemed by destroying the bad person that I was. But then I would start to plan, imagine the moment, do internet searches on methods, and terrify myself with my own behavior. A surge of nausea rising in my gut, fear coursing through every inch of my being. It was as though in those moments, someone else was trying to kill me, and I felt horrified by their intentions. Before the age of 15, I had lost a friend and a family member to suicide. And in my adulthood, I have lost many more friends. This is also something that shaped my relationship to killing myself. Knowing what it does to the survivors, experiencing firsthand the gripping wish to have been there, to have said the right thing, to have stopped it. In my later 20s, someone in my community with the same name as me took her life. A friend confided in me that when she heard the news, she thought it was me. Hearing her describe the devastation of momentarily thinking that I had killed myself impacted me greatly. Of course, once she was informed who had actually died, a different but equally painful surge of grief arrived. Some years back, I had a strange and illuminating experience in which I became aware of a part of myself that was previously challenging to name. I had been doing my own personal work in expanded states, and while I was not doing a journey when this experience occurred, I think the journeys I had done opened me up to it. I was upset, probably a bit activated, and for a moment, the world around me faded away. And I could see this raw image of a girl that I instinctively knew I had encountered many times in my life, but never seen. It was disturbing. She was caught in an eternal scream. She was ripping her hair out, her mouth agape in perpetual agony. Encountering her didn't feel like thinking. It was beyond thoughts. It was a place inside of myself that was so disorganized that I don't think she could really be thought about before that moment. I automatically knew who she was and what she was doing. Her agony was the precise moment when the sexual abuse I had experienced started. She is the statement, "How can this be happening?" But those are the words of an adult, looking back and thinking through it. When the abuse started, my psyche split into pieces. And she is a part of me that could never ask such a question. She is the part that thinks that she is dying. She is the part that is betrayed beyond belief. She is the part that is still experiencing the abuse because she split off when she was living through it and had no idea if it would ever end and could not even maintain enough thought capacity to wonder such a thing. She is the part that became psychotic and lives outside of coherence to survive. She is the part that encountered pure evil. And when I finally saw her, finally felt her, she was the part that was still terrified beyond language. She is the grief when a loved one dies and you say to yourself, no, 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 only to confront moment after moment of remembering that, yes, this is what happened. Death is finite, and what was will never be again. Encountering her prompted many wonderings about healing. Would I have found my way to her in some other modality, or was this only able to be worked with because of the expanded states that had opened me up to finding her? I really don't know. And what could I do with this experience? At the time, and for some years after, I imagined she was never going to be talked through, that no amount of emoting would resolve this, because she would never unknow those experiences. I had thought to myself, she will be lived with, a relationship made between us. It was a reasonable and hopeful response. I was never going back to a life where I had not had these experiences. However, over time, something else happened. Prior to this encounter, I was aware of and thinking about the abuse frequently, turning it like a weathered stone in my pocket. But this part of me needed more than that. I needed more than that. She represented many things, some of which was an inner pain and chaos that I spent large parts of my life trying to escape. Through vices, through isolation, through denial. She represented loss of innocence, of time, of wellness, of safety and trust. I began to feel more of that anguish in real time. I dove in closer to her. It was true. Acknowledging her was not enough to heal this. And I also didn't need to simply stop at living with this extremely injured part of me. Something here needed to be felt and understood beyond what thinking and language offers. I needed to allow myself to more deeply acknowledge everything I had lost and embrace the reality of that tremendous grief. A different kind of grace and potential emerged. A bit more ease and trust that I could do it. That I would find something I needed by getting so close to the turmoil. That there might be more available to me there. Grieving is a part of what allows us to set down the past. Not to be forever in pain about what no longer is, but rather to honor, understand, and be changed by it. I leaned into spiritual work and surrendered more deeply to the mystery of expanded states, not knowing why or how healing was happening, but allowing what I had previously thought to be the end goal to go even further. My sense of what was possible in healing expanded. An aspect of the abuse that has always been hard for me to grapple with is the question of why. Why did this happen to me? I've asked that question in the most painful moments of my life over and over again. There is a quote by the famed psychoanalyst Ronald Fairbairn. Quote, "It is better to be a sinner in a world ruled by God than to live in a world ruled by the devil." End quote. Part of protecting myself, part of being able to go on with a broken heart in an endless world of pain, was to answer the why by believing that I was a devil in heaven, rather than to take in the unbearable reality that I was an innocent child surviving a living hell. And so, as survivors, we feel ashamed as though there is something wrong with us, not the world we are living in. That shame gives us a false sense of control. I am bad, and if I work hard enough at being good or hide things well enough so no one can see, I can control all this chaotic, horrible reality. In some twisted way, feeling ashamed soothes that sense of powerlessness that is too terrifying for a child or an adult to bear. And in this ashamed place, we are alone and worthless. Sexual abuse survivors often have a place inside where the isolation and the self-hatred is very painful, and many feel it to the degree that they could consider taking their own life to end the suffering. Over time, I came to see the wisdom in an impulse towards suicide. There is something in me that needed to die. Death is a transformation, and as someone who has been forced into an extreme state of powerlessness, what could be more powerful than being the leader of your own ritual to transform your pain? When we die, we dissolve back into the earth, and in a sense, we aren't alone or a separate ego anymore. We are one with all things again. I began to see the desire to kill oneself as a desire to be connected to and held by something much larger than ourselves, to move away from the catastrophic loneliness. And often, when someone does kill themselves, their loved ones tend to come together and create a sense of love and connection that truly is much larger than oneself. A coworker I had confided in once gave me advice about suicide. They told me to go to a bridge in some woods outside of town, overlooking lush forest and a winding river. And while I am looking at that view, about to jump, ask myself, do I really want to say goodbye to that beauty? Because when you've experienced something so wretched and ugly, beauty is a balm to the soul. When I first moved to the Bay Area, I was keenly aware that I was one public transit ride away from my death. Most of the time, it felt comforting to know that the Golden Gate Bridge was there, always available to me. Bridges connect us. They are symbolic of the journey from one side to another. And for someone who is suicidal, it can be a concrete symbol of the inner struggle to transform and walk the path from pain to a sense of peace. I am here telling you all of this, so I did find a way to stop myself from jumping. I honored the wisdom embedded in suicidal thoughts. I accepted the impulse to kill, or rather end the existence of something inside of me, the abuser that I never consented to having in my body, still taking up residence in the extremely destructive ways that I treated myself and the shame I had internalized to survive. I accepted the need to be connected and held by something larger than myself: community, loved ones, spirit, and the earth. I accepted that a part of me was trying to take some steps on a path, not to jump off the bridge, but to cross it. When you are standing on the side of the bridge that is self-hatred and isolation, it is hard to see that the other side is self-love and connection. And for some people listening right now, it may be hard to even know what self-love is or how to practice it. Surviving sexual violence is an incredible feat, and some of us don't survive. But it is important to note that many, many of us do. In instances where individuals have attempted to kill themselves and lived, they often report regretting it as soon as they jump, or upon waking up and realizing they have lived. While I deeply respect your right to choose whether or not you keep living your own life, if you are struggling with feeling suicidal, I also want to speak to the part of you that clearly has not done it yet, because you are here listening to my voice right now. I know you may be hurting immensely. I know that there are moments when that pain is so excruciating. Imagining killing yourself feels like a relief. And I also know that these moments can fade. I know this from my own lived experience and from working on a crisis hotline before I became a therapist. On the hotline, I spent hours upon hours with people who just needed a kind person to talk to in a very hard moment. And in this totally turned upside down world we live in, I know finding the right person to talk to can be hard. But I also know that they are out there. I know in the long run, you need intensive healing support. But in the really scary moments, when you think you could go through with killing yourself, that you need something more immediate and comforting right then. If you are considering killing yourself, please, before you go that route, I want to make a few suggestions to you. The first one is this. I encourage you to research suicide and crisis hotlines and try calling one. Just try and see if you can find one you like. There are some hotlines that have amazing people on the other end who are highly trained. I know that at the line I worked at, it was a very serious commitment with a training that I still look back to today as integral to helping me understand how to hold space for other people. You can even call one of these hotlines when you are not feeling suicidal, just to get a sense of how it works, so that you can feel more comfortable calling when you are feeling suicidal. I'm not sure how it works in other places, But in the US, some hotlines are required to call the police against your will if you say certain things, which can be anywhere from traumatic to life-threatening, depending on who you are and what officers respond to the call. For this reason, I also recommend reading the hotline website or asking the first time you call about their protocols. There are hotlines that are completely anonymous who will not call the police or another agency unless you request that. At the time of this recording, the US-based group Wildflower Alliance has a peer support line that is not 24/7, but also does not call the police. They also have a list on their website of free alternative to suicide support groups, many of which are online and accessible from anywhere in the world. You can find out more at wildfloweralliance.org. The second thing I suggest you do is consider if there is anyone in your life you could tell how you are feeling. I know you may feel like no one cares, or it is too shameful to share. But trust me, as someone who has lost people to suicide, we care. We care a lot. Every person I know who has killed themselves, if they had called me, even if we hadn't talked for 10 years, I would have talked to them for hours to support them not to do it, without question. The person you talk to may not be your closest friend or confidant. It might simply be someone who you think won't get overly alarmed, but will take you seriously, and that is enough. The third thing I want to encourage you to do is a big commitment, but if you are chronically struggling with suicidality and you do not have a pet, and you also love animals and have the capacity to care for one, you might consider adopting a pet. I know that sounds extreme, but working on the hotline taught me that many people choose not to kill themselves because they love their pets so much. It is pretty remarkable what we will do to keep our furry little friends alive and well, even choosing to live our own very challenging lives so we can stick around to care for them. A pet is also a little buddy who you can cuddle and get some sweet connection time with every day, and that can be very uplifting for trauma survivors. Taking care of a pet can also support you to take better care of yourself. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is consider doing dialectical behavior therapy, also called DBT. And if you cannot afford that, I urge you to order a workbook and watch some videos about it online. A huge part of feeling suicidal stems from difficulty with regulating emotions. DBT is a modality that is designed to do a variety of things, including provide tangible skills and support for people who are suicidal. It is a very effective model. And the last suggestion I have is to get out to nature, to be with some trees, look at the sky, and watch some squirrels or birds. If you feel like your life is not worth living, please go watch the sunrise. It may not change your mind, but give it a chance. Sometimes feeling connected to the larger web of life can offer us a profound shift in perspective. When I was really in the throes of my suicidal ideation, I had no idea how different my life could be. And when I speak with other survivors who have come out of feeling suicidal and done substantial healing work, they often say the same thing, that they simply could not imagine living without constant, overwhelming pain. This is a bit of a leap of faith, I know. You don't know what else your life has in store for you. It could be that you will make it through this and also be a person who says you are in awe of how different life can be. And I am praying for that to be where your story leads you. I can say that healing from sexual violence has been one of the hardest things I have done in my life. At times, I have struggled to have faith I could do it. I have backslid, I have wallowed, I have cried mercy to the heavens. I have walked through hell and taken up residence in the underworld. But by the grace of the CODEX, I found a path back up and out of it. I now know that I will not be killing myself from the pain of surviving this violence, and I am living with peace that I truly never could have imagined. That is not to say that I am not still a person who suffers, because I definitely am, and this is not a happy ending story that erases what came before it. I will always be a survivor of extreme violence, and I am also simply a person, like everyone else, dealing with a myriad of inescapable issues that come with being alive. While talking about my own relationship to suicide is vulnerable, and I needed a lot of support from my community to do it, I felt something internal driving me forward in the process. Surviving is something we do for ourselves, but it is also something we do for each other. One of the most important factors in preventing my own suicide was other survivors speaking out and showing me a path forward. I share my story in gratitude to those who shared theirs for my survival, and I share it and really this whole series, in part because I know a resource like this is something I needed and didn't have as a young person. Being more publicly vulnerable is a way to honor that need for a younger version of myself. May this series be a balm for you when you need it most. May you find your way. May you find peace.
We'll be back in 2 weeks, where you'll hear Laura and me dive deep into her healing journey. Thank you all for listening.